Here we are at the start of a new year, so welcome 2025. And I hope everybody had a very happy new year. Hello, my name is K.A Bloch, and I am the award-winning poet and author of 4 books that consist of poetry and prose. My channel is called The Practical Poet, and on that channel, I give a little bit more of a modern day approach to poetry. So sometimes poetry can be a little bit intimidating. So I tend to give like my more modern day spin on it and do a little bit of storytelling through poetry, if you will. So I hope that you will check out my channel. Each week I typically feature a poetry reading from one of my 4 books, and I give a little bit of a backstory on the poem, kind of what caused me to create the poem or write it, what was my inspiration, what was my motivation behind writing it, and then I get into the actual poetry reading itself. This week I wanted to do something a little bit different. With it being a new year, I thought this might be a good opportunity to focus on some new material. So one of the reasons that I wanted to create my own blog, by the way, I do have a blog of the same name called The Practical Poet, and you can go there and there's a tab called blog that has all of my poetry readings that I do on my channel in printed form. So one of the reasons that I wanted to create my own channel and my own blog was that so I had an outlet to be able to put out new material without necessarily having to wait until I have enough content for a brand new book. So I'm taking that opportunity now to share some new material. Welcome 2025, some brand new material, and I hope you enjoy it. The reason that I chose this poem for this poetry reading and for this intro to some new material is because the name of the poem is called Letting Go. And at the beginning of a new year, there's typically 2 different paths that people take when we start a new year. A lot of people start off with a new resolution on how they're going to change themselves. You know, I'm going to exercise more. I'm going to stop smoking, stop drinking, lose 10 pounds, what have you. And then the second path that people tend to go through is letting go of things from the past. You know, I'm going to clean out my whole house. I'm going to get rid of all the junk in my house, or I'm going to, just make a clean start and get rid of things that no longer serve me. And that's kind of the journey that the person in this poem is going to take. And the person in this poem, I tend to not give my characters like a male or female role. I leave that up to interpretation from the reader. But in my mind, when I was writing this poem, I did picture it to be more of a female presence. You can choose to disagree and interpret it as a male, as males do go through this process as well. But for me, I just thought of them more in the female role. And so when I refer to the person in this poem, I will refer to it as in the female gender. But again, feel free. It is open to interpretation. I never want to take that away from the reader. So I hope that you, can kind of come to your own conclusion as to whether this is a male or female, and it probably doesn't really matter. It's a person, right? So, and they're going through a grieving process. They have suffered a loss. And again, we don't know what kind of a loss it was. We assume that it was probably a death, but it could be a breakup, it could be a divorce. The reason that I say we assume that is probably a death was because there's not a lot of anger directed to the person who's no longer here. There is anger for sure. There's a lot of anger as this person is still moving through the different stages of the grieving process, but there's not a lot of anger directed right at the person themselves. So going back to the anger that's directed, just the anger that as the person is going through the grieving process, if you're familiar with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, she kind of pioneered all of the studies on near-death studies and on death and dying and the grieving process that we go through. And she identified 5 different stages of grieving, the first being denial, and then anger, bargaining, depression, and then finally, the ultimate goal being acceptance. And the person in this poem is finding themselves stuck a little bit in the anger phase. They've kind of moved beyond the denial, I feel like, and they're really stuck in anger and maybe a little bit of depression. So some of these stages overlap. And these stages, as we go through the grieving process, it's not like, when we graduate high school or when we leave 2nd grade and move on to 3rd grade, we're never ever going to go back to 2nd grade again, or we're never going to go back to high school once we graduate. We are done with the grades in school. But with grieving and with the different stages of grieving, it's not always like that. We can slide back and forth into the different stages. And so the person in this poem is a little bit in the anger, a little bit in the depression stage, as well as in the anger stage. And they are, starting to realize that they need to pull themselves out of this state that they're in, and they need to start moving on and kind of coming to terms with this, but they don't know how to do that. And when you are in the throes of grief, you don't know how to do that. Just lifting your head off of your pillow in the morning is a big feat. So the person here decides that they're going to go ahead and go for a walk. So they put on one of their shoes. They struggle to put on the other one. They allow one foot to touch the floor. Finally, the other one joins in, and they decide that they're going to go for a walk outside. And like I mentioned, for anybody grieving, that's actually a very big step for them to do. And so he or she in the poem, the main character, start to take a walk. And as they do that, there's so many conflicting emotions that they're feeling. They feel like they're unaware of their surroundings, or kind of living in a fog, but yet they can smell certain scents in the air. They are yelling at the skies, like, why did you do this to me? But yet they're praying to the heavens. There's all kinds of different conflicting emotions that they're feeling. They feel like they're on maybe more secure footing, but yet the road feels rocky underneath their feet. There's so many different things that they're going through. But while they're on this journey, while they're out in this fresh air and they're walking this path, they also start to begin to feel a little bit hopeful, like, it's the first step. They're taking a big step here by leaving the confines of their home and their bed and their comfort and going out into the world. And for them, that is, like I mentioned, a big step. So as they're walking along, suddenly they have a little bit of a setback. They see something ahead of them in their path, and it just sets them off. And, anger can be like that. Anger is kind of an emotion without rationalization, right? Sometimes when we're angry, we react in ways that we would not react when we are of sound mind. And this person just almost flies into a fit of rage when they see this beautiful thing in their path. And the reason that they fly into a fit of rage is because they have been living in gloom and doom and ugliness and darkness for quite a while now. And they don't even know what beauty looks like. And suddenly they see something in front of them and it looks beautiful. And they're like, why am I seeing this? This isn't put here for me. I'm not entitled to any beauty in this world. I'm not entitled to enjoy any pleasure. I've just been stricken with this grief, and I'm not even allowed to enjoy this. So the person wants to go over and they want to destroy it. And again, anger is a little bit of, when we're that angry, we're not really thinking straight. And, so she started off a little bit in the depression phase, and then backslid, like I mentioned, going back to the different stages, kind of backslid back into the anger phase, and is trying to come to terms with that. And sometimes we don't even know what causes us to go back to a different state. Maybe we hear a song on the radio, or maybe we're in the store and we smell somebody's perfume or cologne, and it reminds us of the person, and we can kind of pinpoint why we're feeling the way we feel. Other times it's just kind of just something overcomes us. We can't even put our finger on what caused us to slip back into the anger phase or the denial phase or the depression phase. And we just, we're trying to come to terms with it, but we don't even really understand it ourselves. And our friends and family may say to us, what happened? You were doing so well. You were coping with, with everything so well. What made you kind of backslide? And we may just shrug and say, I don't know. And hopefully we have friends and family that support us and that allow us the leeway to feel all the feelings when they hit. And that we have a really good support system when those feelings hit. So this person, again, kind of flies off back into the anger phase, and she starts to, she wants to destroy this beautiful thing, but then she realizes, just because she's living in darkness doesn't mean she can steal anybody else's light. Just because she's living in a world that feels cruel to her doesn't mean that she can take away beauty from anybody else that wants to enjoy it and experience it. And so there's a bit of a transformation happening within her, or within him, however you choose to interpret the main character. But there's a transformation happening. They're beginning to realize that, in order for them to move forward, they need to move forward. They need to move through these different stages of grief. And one of the ways that they have to do that is they start to realize that they need to let this person go in order for them to survive. And so an interesting little fact about this poem is it does have a subtitle, and the subtitle is AKA Survival. I wasn't sure what to call the poem, and they both seemed appropriate. And I thought so many people can relate to letting go of something, letting go of a person, letting go of a memory, letting go of something that doesn't serve us. But the main theme or a main point of this poem is survival. And sometimes in order for us to grow and to survive and to thrive, we have to let go of things that are no longer in our world, things that are just kind of hanging out in our head, but no longer physically a part of us. And in order to move on and to become a better person, we need to let things go. So I did subtitle it. You'll have to let me know if you like the subtitle, or if one name resonates more with you than the other name. But with that, I'd like to get into the reading of the poem. You'll be able to hear the different phases that the person is going through. And after they come to the realization that they can't destroy this beautiful thing in their path, you can kind of hear the transformation happening, and you see them start to realize, or you hear them start to realize, that the world is opening up to them, and they just have to accept it. It is theirs for the taking. And they start to become a little bit excited about it, and they start to embrace it, and they start to, like I mentioned, realize that in order for them to move forward, they can't look back anymore. So with that, I'd like to get into the reading of the poem. I'm going to take a quick sip of tea. I've been talking a lot today, so my voice is a little strained. It's a very cold day. We have snow coming here. I don't know how things are in your part of the world, but hopefully you're having a nice day. I'm going to go ahead and put my glasses on and get into the reading of this poem. Again, the title is Letting Go, subtitle, AKA Survival. Another year without you near, another year's gone by, as I slip my shoes onto my feet and stand up with a sigh. One step forward, two steps back, but I finally find my stride. The feelings slowly flow in, but I push them all aside. I begin to find my footing as I walk this lonely road. My shoulders hunching forward represent my heavy load. I see the dusty gravel on the road beneath my feet. I smell the lilacs in the air with a scent that is so sweet. I take in all the senses, but yet I am so numb as I plead for an outcome that I know will never come. It's not that I'm in denial, but maybe yet I am. People say I'm angry, but I don't give a damn. I pray to all the gods above as I've tried to beg and barter, but the silence that responds only serves to make this harder. I've pushed the memories aside, finding comfort in repression, but eventually they surface, lunging me back into depression. How long will all this linger? How long will this all last? How much of my future will be spent living in the past? How many days and months will flow until decades have gone by? How many minutes will tick on past until I cease to cry? How do I keep on going when the path is long and dark? Where do I find color in a world that is so stark? How don't I trip on memories that make my footsteps stumble? How do I stand up again when I find solace in the crumble? I'll tell you how. It's just one foot that reaches for the floor until the other foot joins in and they escort me to the door. And that door leads me to the road as I try not to look back. I look to the skies and heavens for the courage that I lack. I glance down at the gravel road, rocky under my feet. I breathe in all the lilacs that have turned the air so sweet. I find some gratitude and joy as nature helps me cope. And for the first time in a long time, I grasp a tiny bit of hope. Then ahead of me, I see it, standing all alone, a tiny little rosebud among the rocks and stone. I admire its tenacity and the strength that it has found to push through the adversity and make its way above the ground. Though part of me in anger and the coldness in my blood wants to walk right over to it and step on that tiny bud and crush it to the ground so that it loses any chance of brightening this world as the wind lures it to dance. But I know I cannot do that. I know it isn't right. Just because I live in darkness, I can't steal another's light. Oh, the beauty in this world, it's there for everyone to see. But I feel so left behind, as there's no beauty left in me. Only cruelty remains, and anger and despair. I can't enjoy the sunshine or sweet lilacs in the air. But yes, I can. It is okay to allow myself to grieve and embrace all the feelings while also praying they will leave. So many raw emotions as I confront this grief, but as I shed my burdens, I begin to feel relief. For the shedding of my anger through the tears that start to flow is like the shedding of a former self, making room for me to grow. And though I'll grow without you, for you're not here any longer, just knowing you and loving you has served to make me stronger. And through this strength, I will live on. Through this strength, I will prevail to live a long and fruitful life. I know I will not fail. So I look upon this tiny bud as if it were a sign placed directly in my path for only me to find. I bend down to get a closer look, and my lips form a slight smile. My muscles protest the movement, for it has been quite a while. But for the first time in a long time, I stand up tall and straight and look forward to the future. In fact, I cannot wait. I am sure that I will stumble, and I'm most definitely scared. But for the first time in a long time, I feel that I'm prepared. And living in the past no longer serves my soul. I have to make a new life that must become my goal. After the darkest, coldest nights, I await the sun's arrival, and I know that moving forward is the key to my survival. There are many things I'm unsure of, but one thing that I know, in order for myself to live, I have to let you go. So that is the poetry reading of the new poem called Letting Go, aka Survival. So I hope that you enjoyed it. A couple of things here, as I mentioned, the person goes through a transformation. You can hear them going through the different phases, ultimately coming, through the anger phase, coming out on the other side, and hopefully starting to find some acceptance with the situation, starting to realize that they have to keep moving forward, and they can't keep holding on to the bad memories of the past. So I did hear a quote the other day that I thought was appropriate. Somebody actually said that they saw it on a sign, and it said, "Don't look backward, you're not going that way." And I thought that was a really good quote. There's also another quote that I wanted to include here. This was a quote that I included on a poem called Gone that was from my third book called Gather Seeds of Hope. And the poem Gone, the poetry reading for that, is actually listed on my channel as well as on my blog. And I included this quote with that poem because it also has to do with death and grieving. And I thought that it was appropriate here as well, so I'd like to share it. This was a quote from Queen Elizabeth I, and this is very truthful as one moves through the different stages of grief. And the quote states, "Grief never ends, but it changes. It is a passage, not a place to stay. Grief is not a sign of weakness, nor a lack of faith. It is the price of love." So I really like that quote, talking about how we move through the different stages of grief. And it is a passage. It's a passage that we have to go through when we're grieving. And hopefully, like the person in this poem, we can eventually find our footing. We can eventually, leave things behind and start to make our way into the world. We have no choice, right? We have to keep going on. And our very own survival depends on it, as the person in this poem realized. So I hope that you enjoyed this poetry reading of this brand new material, Letting Go, subtitle aka Survival. The poem in its written form can be found on my blog at thepracticalpoet.com/blog. And if you like this video reading and you want to be notified each week when I do a new weekly poetry reading, please click the like and subscribe button. And with that, I'm going to bid you goodbye, and I hope that we chat again real soon. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope that you enjoyed this new material. Thanks so much. Bye.